Hello, my name is Garon Joannou. I am a graduate student at the University of Florida. I am finishing up my final semester, and as part of my program, the program being Sustainable Development Practices, I am required to complete um, a field practicum experience, a field work experience, which I completed this past summer, the summer of 2024. And in this experience, I contacted an organization. I will get a bit more into the details in the subsequent slides, but I contacted an organization and established a set of objectives and deliverables that I would be working with them to achieve. And this is the name of my project. So, improving the sustainability of operations at the SWAG Resource Center in Gainesville, Florida. And without further ado, I'll jump right into it. So, just a brief overview of what I'll be discussing. Starting with an introduction, field practicum context, host organization, information on them, objectives, my CC framework, my methodology, my results, my discussion, followed by recommendations, limitations, and conclusion. I wanted to work in community development. I knew that for certain. That's the beginning of my work meant that I needed to research local nonprofits that engage with this community development. After some networking, I found SWAG, the Southwest Advocacy Group. They are a resource center based here in Gainesville, Florida, and I'll go a bit more into their history and context in a second. So, after some initial interviews and discussion with staff, it was decided that I would help improve the food pantry operations. Internal changes meant that this could no longer be the case. I'll spare the details with that, things changed, and I needed to essentially change my fieldwork focus and change what I had agreed upon originally to something that would be better reflective of my actual day-to-day experience at the center. So I spent much of the time at the front desk, which was an instrumental part of the operations at the resource center. The front desk workers are responsible for intake, assessing patron needs, and providing resources or services as effectively as possible. This role gave me a unique perspective on the center's day to day operations, highlighted its strengths and challenges that staff, interns, and volunteers face. For the record, I was officially an intern at this organization. To better reflect my experiences, as I mentioned, I wanted to focus a bit more on, what I was doing at the front desk. What does that entail? How can I improve that operation? And with the help of staff, I identified a critical need, understanding the extent of SWAG's resources, services, and develop a structured way for staff to navigate and utilize them. So, going into a bit more about the context. These next few this section, I'm going to discuss the importance of SWAG's work. Essentially, I'll discuss the where and the why of its founding. Here are the main neighborhoods that the center caters to or serves. In the results section, I will discuss the distribution of the patrons among these neighborhoods, but with this in mind, you will not be denied services if you're not from these specific neighborhoods that you can see in front of you here. Um, some services, resources, and events are specific to these locations or specific to where SWAG is located. The SWAG highlights certain socioeconomic indicators as the driving force behind its area of operations. These indicators include child maltreatment, domestic violence, health disparities, lack of recreation for youth, poverty, and education disparities. I'll quickly touch on some of those, but I want to focus more on poverty as one indicator. The resource center is located in the zip code of 32607, which is the county's fifth most impoverished zip code. The number is distorted by the mix of poor and wealthy residents. I am also a part of the zip code. Um, Another indicator that SWAG highlights is crime. So the Alachua County Sheriff's Office divides the county into specific zones based on the area's call load. The zone with the highest call load is called the Mike Zone. This zone is just over 1 square mile. You can see it here. This is where the resource center is located. The zone is just over 1 square mile and is located in zip code 32607. This is where the resource center is located, as you can see. I wanted to share this information to demonstrate how socioeconomic obstacles and concerns for families in these neighborhoods do not exist in a vacuum. More often than not, the issues patrons experience were connected in some fashion. So keep this in mind during the rest of this presentation because it'll be, important contextual information. So SWAG was established in February 2010 by a group of Gainesville locals led by the late Joan Canton. Partnership for Strong Families is the parent organization, provides financial and logistical support. SWAG's mission is to address the needs of the community by connecting individuals and families to services, resources through advocacy and partnerships with agencies and community partners. The center aims to build on existing assets, identify needs, and connect individuals and families to resources. So the story of SWAG's origin and the continued presence of the SWAG OGs, as they call them, they are essential factors in the center's perceived welcoming nature and its status as a desired location for community events. I witnessed this firsthand, and that was my impression, uh, after my summer there. So, in the introduction, I mentioned how my practicum goal had to be adjusted. This is what I chose to focus on after discussing with other staff. That is, improve the front desk operations at the SWAG Resource Center. From there, I identified primary objectives to help achieve this goal, those being a deliverable of an employee front desk guidebook and a formal analysis report, which would be more of the academic side of what I produced. The secondary objectives would go on to inform the primary ones, and those secondary objectives being a demographic and service analysis, contact and resource list, and best practices and improvements, as well as safety protocols. So I'm going to go over to my conceptual contextual framework. While my day-to-day at the resource center was more often than not unstructured and nonlinear, um, the development of this report and its deliverables follow a straightforward and systematic process. I just discussed the objectives, so within this framework, but I will move on to the methodology specifically. So, primary research data collection. My methodology can be split into two categories. That being the first one that involved an intake form data collection, a supplementary data collection, which included internal SWAG records, publicly available data. So what I mean by that, so this first one, intake form data collection, the intake form was a very big part of the day-to-day at the resource center. As a front desk worker, people would come to me. As soon as you open the door, I would be the first face that you see, and anyone that walks in and requests services or resources, they're required to fill out a intake form, regardless if it's their first time or their 100th time being there. This form had a bunch of information that the required information from the patron, information like demographic information, so age, sex, neighborhood, contact information in case there was a reason why we needed to get back in touch with them, and then further, more of a needs assessment to try and better understand why they were requesting services. So they could put down, for instance, they were looking for a food bag, or they were looking for housing resources, or looking for an emergency clothing bag. They would write that on the form. This information was then stored in a database that is the responsibility of Partnership for Strong Families. They have access to this information. And when completing this process for the academic report and my subsequent analysis, I needed to request that information from the databases. So that information played a big part in my conclusions and my discussion section, which I get to in a minute. But that was the bulk of like the actual data collection, the supplementary data collection. So this second part here, there was a lot of information, a lot of files that existed already that SWAG had, and a big issue that a few of the staff had identified was the disorganization that was prevalent. They had done an amazing job when it came to actually contacting these people and having this community knowledge as far as being able to tap into local networks and having established relationships with a lot of different organizations. So that didn't need to be developed further, but kind of bringing everything into like a centralized platform was important. And that goes into my secondary analytic process, which is the partner and resource analysis. But prior to that, I needed to obtain everything. So doing research and filling out the blanks. So if an important person contact, resource, whatever wasn't available, I needed to, look for publicly available data to kind of fill those gaps. Second, I want to talk about the analytic processes. So these are the data organization and assessment. First, the demographic and service analysis. This is what I mentioned before. So the information from the intake forms, that information formed this analysis. So we have active services, event attendance, services requested, visitors by neighborhood, visitors by month. I will get into the specifics later. Next, partner and resource analysis. So we have the categorizing resources, examples of this being food, housing, health services, and past services, and potential new partnerships. That was all part of that. The SOAR analysis is strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results. That was informed by a series of informal conversations with staff, along with a survey that I distributed to other interns. I will move on now. So the results. I'm going to start with the demographic and service analysis results. This analysis highlights key trends and patterns in patron characteristics and service usage. The gender identification of patrons revealed that a significant majority identified as women, so that's 1,637, and followed by male patrons of 778. A smaller portion of residents either preferred not to answer or identified as transgender. This trend underscores the importance of tailoring services and resources to meet the needs of women in the community, being the majority of the people that were seeking help, representing the largest demographic group of patrons served by SWAG. So, for example, women-focused program such as maternal health resources, childcare support, and employment assistance. These could be prioritized to address specific challenges encountered by the group. So next I'm going to move to age. The SWAG Resource Center's patrons are of a pretty diverse age range. The highest concentration is among those aged, sorry about that. So yeah, the highest concentration is age 30 to 39, as you can see here, followed by 60 to 69. Notably younger age groups, including children, were prevalent. But this could be just I know for a fact this is kids that would come in from the after school programs and just wanted to fill out the forms because they wanted to pretend to be adults. But yeah, so this age distribution suggests that many patrons of the age are of the age to have families with children, highlighting the need for family-oriented resources and services. Moreover, the high representation of young to middle-aged adults indicates a demand for career development programs, relevant health resources, and parental support, all of which are reflective in my own experiences as well. So this looks familiar for a reason. So I want to quickly touch on the neighborhoods, the breakdown of the neighborhoods. The geographic distribution of patrons illustrates that the majority came from nearby neighborhoods of Linton Oaks, Holly Heights, with a smaller yet notable presence from other adjacent neighborhoods like Tower Oaks, Majestic Oaks, and Hidden Oaks. These figures suggest that SWAG workers should anticipate higher engagement from Linton Oaks and Holly Heights. This concentration points to the need for tailored outreach and resource allocation strategies in these neighborhoods. That was also reflective of my experiences. They were the closest in proximity, and when we had to actually go and do outreach efforts because we were trying to raise awareness about a certain event and spread word about like an opportunity that we thought that residents could take advantage of, we also often had to just start walking around and passing out flyers and spreading information, and engaging with people directly in these neighborhoods. Anyways, so this distribution may also reflect disparities in access rather than a lack of demand in further neighborhoods. It is possible that residents of Linton Oaks and Holly Heights arrive in disproportionate numbers due to proximity, and that's clear, while the individuals in other distant areas face barriers such as transportation, or a lack of awareness about the services that SWAG offers. Now I want to move on to the concrete, or to the specific services that are being offered. So concrete support constitutes the largest, so this giant piece of the pie here, that is 193 instances of patrons requesting concrete support. This category will be broken down further 193, 1,937. I will break down this larger section in the next slide, but Community building services, so that's 174 instances. These include activities like the popular community dinner, swag potluck, which fosters social connection and neighborhood cohesion through meal gatherings. While not all of them are related to meals, these events always promote a sense of belonging and mutual support among patrons. Next is childcare resources, and this encompasses programs like early childhood learning, parent night, brunch and learn, as well as access to healthy families resources. These services support parents and children in childcare and early education, empowering families and enhancing development outcomes. So, patient resilience services, there's 82 instances of this, and this includes job readiness programs, tobacco cessation support, mental health services, domestic violence assistance, and legal aid. These programs equip patrons with tools and resources for long term stability and personal empowerment, addressing systemic challenges in their lives. Now I'm going to go break down the concrete support that I alluded to earlier. Here's what that looks like. So, breaking this down, we can see that food services, there's 882 instances of food services being requested, by far the most, with 45.5%. And what does this look like? So, in the center itself, this typically includes emergency food bags. Given the original focus of my work there, I became intimately familiar with like the food process or the food resources that we have. And again, the biggest is emergency food bags. Outside of the food events, we have they have a pantry there where they store various food donations, leftovers from food distribution events, and that takes up the bulk of the pantry along with some like refrigerated goods and stuff like that. What happens is if a patron is requesting emergency food, typically because of a certain something that happened, whether they recently lost their work or are unable to afford their next grocery purchase or the next grocery run, because this is not something that we can do every single day, every week. There's a limit as far as, once every 6 months, and that is put into place because of the limitation for what they actually have in the pantry. So once every 6 months is a database that I, mentioned before. Prior to, receiving their food, we check to make sure if they're eligible. After determining that they are, my job was to then make the bags, and that involved asking them about different questions to get a better sense of their family structure. So do I include baby food? Do I include something sweet for the kids? Do I include and that also involved asking about any dietary restrictions. So if they're vegetarian, if they're not able to eat pork, if they anything else that they would prefer not to have in their bag. Because of the limited selection, it was kind of difficult to tailor everything to the best of to their specific needs. But allergies are obviously a priority, so that would be taken care of. But yeah, you can request everything you want. It's whatever we had, and often because the limited donations that were coming through, it wasn't a ton at times. So see, that's a twice a year service, and that after making those bags, there's two big paper bags. So it was quite a substantial amount of food. The next uh offering that they had was the blessing bags. So blessing bags are smaller, like think of smaller emergency food bags. They were typically kept in uh, like a gallon Ziploc bag. In it, you can find kind of smaller items like healthy snacks, a water bottle, maybe like a can or two of protein, something like that, along with a handout for you know other food services that are in the area. That was also included in the emergency food bag, a list of other pantries and food services that they could request or go visit. But the blessing bags, as they were called, were developed are created by a local church in the area that delivers them, and then we distribute them to those that ask. The limitation on that is once every 2 weeks. So the next one is document support services. It's 329 instances of that. And this by this I mean we provide access to crucial resources like computer, phone use, printing, food stamp assistance, and notary services. This was a common one. We have a set of computers that are open to the public, and a printer slash copier slash faxing machine that could be used by the public as well, with our supervision, of course. And typically, what happened is these computers were reserved for, like, necessary services. So if you were applying for jobs, doing an application online, that's what the computers were reserved for. And that goes for the printing, faxing, and copying services too. So, copying, printing out resumes, printing out files, uh, stuff like that. So, next is clothing assistance. This is delivered through initiatives like the emergency clothing, which is a specific service where you can come in and request clothing, and we provide a single outfit. And this is typically in serious cases of need. So if you have a job, a job interview the next day, and you really need, something, relatively nice to wear, a single outfit, or your kid just needs a single outfit because, for one reason or another, that is what that was for. If you wanted to have something more substantial, that is the clothing closet event. That was extremely common. That was a weekly event where patrons can choose as much clothing as they want for themselves or their family. It was more common than not. Mothers would bring in their kids, and they would just, supervise them picking out clothes. And there was no real limitation other than, like, you know, within reason. Housing support. So 207 instances of this. This includes rent and utility assistance. Excuse me. Rent and utility assistance and general housing aid. So addressing this critical area for community stability was pretty common in my experience as well. SWAG does not have the funds to provide direct financial aid to patrons, but it provides essential context and networks that are more specialized to their needs. From my experience, this was obviously very common, but a frustrating part of this because many of the resources that we provide, whether they were independent nonprofit organizations that provide financial assistance for, small utility payments, rental payments, or, housing vouchers and applications, very, very difficult to get. There was not a whole lot of funding for these areas, and often the applications that were the biggest recommendation that I was giving out and helping patrons with. These applications were online applications that opened up at certain times of the week, and would fill up within 5 minutes. So, more often than not, patrons would be sitting there on our computers, refreshing the page, trying to, get the applications submitted, only to find out that, they were too slow, or it filled up too fast, to no fault of their own. So yeah, that was quite a frustrating part of my time there. Just the lack of support coming from this, from the state, the lack of social services coming from the state and the federal government was frustrating. And I could, you know, did my best to find the best options for individuals when it came to their housing preferences. So whether it was, shelters, which was for, short-term unhoused patrons that really just needed a place to stay, or something more long-term, so low-income housing. We had a list of all the potential opportunities, or, area or organizations and places to stay, and with their specific requirements. So if you were a family, there would be some places that would, prioritize families. Other places would prioritize, women. Other places would prioritize, other disenfranchised groups. So that was a big part of my time there. And then health services. So this typically was comprised of a hygiene bag, and this contained personal hygiene items. You would come in, request a specific hygiene item, whether it was toothpaste, soaps, shampoo, most commonly deodorant, and we would provide a small bag with that. And female products were always free, and we would provide them on request. There was no limit on female products, but there was a limit on the hygiene bags just because there were very limited donations. So next, infant child care support. So 85 instances of this. This includes provisions for infant products, almost entirely diapers and formula. Next, material assistance resources, so 52 instances. So this covers school supplies and other necessities for families, particularly during the back to school periods. This was, obviously relevant for my time there because I was there till the end of the summer. We had back to school events and all that type of stuff. Transportation aids. So, this typically was, emergency bus passes. Due to the short supply, these passes are limited to patrons who needed transportation for jobs, education, and other essential services. They have smaller subcategories, including employment assistance, which supports job search and readiness, human resource information, which guides patrons in navigating additional support systems, and a general other category. So, next, the partner and resource analysis. The primary outcome of this method was the creation of the contact and resource list, a live document designed to enhance SWAG's resource center's ability to connect patrons with appropriate resources. I won't show this 32-page document because some contact information might be sensitive, but how did this get put together? So I, along with the help of staff, identified potential partners. This included reviewing existing community connections and researched additional organizations that provide services aligned with the needs of the SWAG patrons, gathering and verifying information for each identified partner. Detailed contact information, eligibility criteria, and service descriptions were obtained and validated to ensure accuracy and reliability. This process involved additional research or contacting the organization for current information, categorizing these resources. So, services were categorized based on key areas of need, so housing, utilities, and childcare, to streamline navigation and support the keyword-based searching. Staff navigated this guide can utilize their search function to type in these keywords. So Control F on this document, and you can type in housing, childcare, and it should take you to the contacts for the necessary resource. Next, I'm going to talk about the SOAR analysis. So the SOAR analysis provides valuable insights into the operational dynamics of the SWAG Resource Center. It's explicitly focused on front desk operations and their role in delivering effective services to patrons. This analysis combined data from a structured survey, which I distributed to SWAG staff with experiences working the desk, knowledge gained through informal conversations, and hands-on experience from my practicum itself. So, to start with strengths. So we have strong community partners. The survey responses and discussions highlighted the center's critical strengths. So staff members described the work as rewarding and emphasized the value of forming meaningful connections with patrons. Volunteers and interns were praised for their adaptability, enthusiasm, and ability to create a welcoming environment, which I thought was great. Next, opportunities. Opportunities for improvement centered on enhancing the onboarding process, developing streamlined resource navigation tools, and providing more comprehensive training for temporary staff. Survey respondents noted that clear procedures and better preparation for front desk operations would improve the center's efficiency and allow for more consistent service delivery. Specific suggestions included increasing familiarity with language line for non-English speaking patrons and establishing computer skills training classes to foster greater independence among the patrons so they didn't need to request the help of someone working at the desk. Next, aspirations. So the analysis revealed aspirations to create a more structured and supportive environment for interns and volunteers specifically. This developed a comprehensive training guide. Participants envisioned an operational model with more transparent workflows, better organization, and targeted efforts to strengthen connections with untapped resources and partnerships. Results. So the portion of this analysis is still ongoing. Some practices from this report have slowly been applied due to recommendations of the natural progression of operations that happen at the center. The progress that has occurred thus far has resulted in improvements in operational efficiency, staff, and volunteer satisfaction with an overall service delivery. Key outcomes include enhanced clarity in front desk roles and responsibilities, and identifying actionable steps to address challenges such as understaffing and gaps in resource availability. So, in my report, I discussed these findings in more detail. I in particular the demographic and service data analysis. However, for this presentation, I want to focus on cross-scale considerations or how this resource center can help us understand systems thinking. I also want to discuss how to integrate these different scales into the guidebook, but for now, I will just discuss the implications. So, SWAG serves as a meaningful example of a microsystem. By this, I mean that it reflects the complex interplay of social mechanisms and phenomena within the neighborhoods it serves. Families rely on one another, community events unite people, and SWAG is an epicenter for the spread of information. Building on this idea, a systems thinking approach integrates an understanding of SWAG and its role within interconnected scales, from local community interactions to state and federal policy. So ultimately, this approach underscores the importance of adaptability. It also situates the resource center within broader systemic frameworks. Let's start with the national scale, which I put up there a bit preemptively. At the national level, the social service landscape, funding trends, policies, and best practices influence local organizations like the SWAG Resource Center. Federal programs such as food assistance, housing support, and employment aid, they set the standard and provide resources that the center relies on to meet community needs. Specific examples include temporary cash assistance, so TCA, Medicaid, health coverage for people with low income, and food assistance programs. Federal food assistance programs were the most common in my experience, that Swagworks and I, helped them out with. Navigating this nutritional assistance program, supplemental nutritional assistance program, so SNAP benefits, demonstrated a series of barriers that patrons encountered. So like navigating these applications online was, sometimes foreign for people without a whole lot of a technical experience or technological experience. An absence of needed resources like a smartphone or personal computer means that it means that online accessibility is unreliable. So many families work multiple jobs to afford an increase in cost of living as well. Scheduling conflicts due to employment and childcare were super frequent in my discussions with patrons. Next, I'll talk about the state scale. Um, these are regulations around public assistance, labor, and volunteer management, and how these play a crucial role in operations. Florida specific policies on social services and employment laws impact how services are structured and who qualifies for them. My research and experience suggests that Florida social services are primarily overseen by the Department of Children and Families, so that's DCF, and they focus on protecting children through child abuse prevention. In my original presentation of this, I made the point that there has been recent proposals for policies that would get rid of regulations around child labor laws here in the state of Florida, in the free state of Florida. So you can only imagine that there would be some type of muddying in the water or complications when it comes to how these regulations are overseen. There seems to be less support for state level initiatives and funding opportunities around improving conditions like food assistance, housing, or healthcare. It's been a consistent reality that the administration in Florida and the current federal administration and past administrations do not care about the working class. And these state level initiatives for improving material conditions have done some aid, have improved people's lives to some degree, but the consistent frustration I would see from individuals was, the heartbreaking at times, because there was no lack of effort on behalf of the patrons. This was a lack of clarity more often than not, and sometimes a lack of capacity too. So working at the center, I most commonly saw this manifest in helping patrons who are struggling with housing insecurity or utility payments. I mentioned that before. Next, and finally, is the community and local scale. So the Resource Center's influence is most evident at the local scale as it addresses the immediate needs of Gainesville's residents. Community-specific factors such as socioeconomic conditions, prevalent issues like housing instability and unemployment, and also local partnerships outside of the prevalent issues, shape the day-to-day operations. So there is a diverse and extensive group of local organizations affiliated with SWAG. The local scale influences most made most evident in my experiences were that of local business development and the gentrification caused by or causes specific to Gainesville, as stated in an article by the Independent Florida Gator written in 2022. There's a neglect of specific communities in Gainesville is related to the development of more influential areas in the city, almost certainly, involving the university. The community or local scale analysis provided proved to be the most difficult, even with my examples. These phenomena cannot be solely attributed to local factors, so understanding the source of Gainesville's equitable development requires a complex systemic analysis beyond this report scale. But thinking within systems is still was beneficial for me at the very least in kind of grounding my work and contextualizing, the issues that popped up every day. So my appreciation for systems thinking has grown immensely since studying this. So next, I'm going to move on to recommendations. An underlying goal of my practicum works parallel with the guiding philosophy of SWAG and its partners, and that can be summarized in two words: sustainability and resilience. So to maximize the impact of SWAG's resource center and the employee guidebook, I recommend that the document undergo regular updates and maintenance. My second recommendation is to conduct a continued in-depth stakeholder analysis focusing on partner organizations, while my stakeholder analysis was more so focused on kind of collecting the existing data and resource information that was out there and centralizing it onto a single document. A network of resource centers and similar organizations do exist under the umbrella of Partnership for Strong Families, and SWAG has existing ties to local organizations through the greater Gainesville area. Assessing and strengthening these partnerships is where I see the opportunity. This would be a valuable foundation for a new collaboration and resource sharing opportunities. My final recommendation is to reassess current procedures for seeking employment feedback. While feedback mechanisms exist, things at the center are dynamic and change to fit the needs of the community quite frequently. A feedback system should reflect this. A revised feedback process would enable SWAG staff to voice insights and improvements. Next, I'm going to talk about the limitations. There's two that I want to touch on really quickly. So these being the primary one was the time frame for my data collection. There were restrictions to data collection systems, which meant that I was only able to access data from the period which my practicum took place, so the summer of 2024. So 3 months, 4 months for that summer. While the data was thorough, any trends that may arise due to seasonal effects were not reflected in my work. And in an introduction, I raised another limitation, which was the shift in my practicum focus. Initially, my project aimed to improve the food pantry specifically, but that specific concrete service, but I needed to make a change. And this was after doing the research and development of a proposal which focused on the food pantry specifically. So the preparation work that I did beforehand was focused on one specific thing rather than the full matrix of services that were offered. So next and finally, I will talk about the conclusion of this work. So I hope that my report contributes to the SWAG Resource Center's ongoing efforts by providing a comprehensive systems thinking analysis of its operations and community needs. I hope that the employment guidebook, the primary deliverables of this practicum, can help improve operational efficiency, ensure consistency in care, and empower staff, interns, and volunteers to serve the community better. My work aims to situate SWAG within a broader socioeconomic policy framework through a systems thinking approach and how interconnected scales that shape its operation. Quantitative data analysis reveals two critical pillars, those being demographic trends and service distribution patterns. The demographic data shows that SWAG's patrons are predominantly women and span a wide range age range, including middle-aged adults and families with children. This diversity underscores the importance of tailoring services to accommodate multi-generational and familial needs. Service usage patterns highlight a high demand for essential services such as food, document assistance, and clothing, as well as significant interaction with housing and health services. These findings emphasize the necessity of equipping staff with knowledge and tools to address the community's most pressing challenges. Before starting their intern or volunteer experience at SWAG, workers can now be better prepared by knowing the distribution of the services they will provide to patrons. Hopefully, this work identifies a key area for improvements and offers actionable recommendations to enhance service delivery. So I just want to say thank you to a few people. My academic committee, so Dr. Susan Paulson, who acted as my chair, and Dr. Latoya O'Neill, who represented my minor. Every single person in my graduate program, Sustainable Development Practices, very influential. Thank you to everyone. Dr. Glenn Galloway, the director of my program, Dr. Andy Noss, who was, extremely helpful behind the scenes. Thank you to him. And every single person as well who worked behind the scenes. The Swag Center staff was amazing. Um, every person that I worked with, the other interns and the volunteers, but specifically, I want to say thank you to Sydney, the family support coordinator at Swag. She was acted as my supervisor and was thrust into a position of like crazy responsibility. So thank you to her for her support. My partner, for her support as well, my family, my parents, and the entirety of the community. Every person that came in, spoke with me, and engaged with me, especially the kids, like everyone was just very welcoming to a stranger in this community. So thank you. Here are my references. And yes, in my original presentation, this is when I opened up the questions, but since this is recording, I'm just going to end it here. So thank you again for watching.